What if the man who once vowed to shield his wife from the world's harshest storms is now the very one unleashing a tempest against her? What if Prince Harry himself has become the whistleblower in the scandal that could redefine Meghan Markle forever? These are not idle speculations whispered in dark corners of tabloids. These are the thunderous allegations now shaking the core of a royal fairy tale gone wrong. And the first chilling detail? Harry has accused Meghan of diverting money from charities intended to save children's lives. Imagine that for a moment. Children's hospitals, desperate for funding, hoping for lifelines that could provide treatment, medicine, hope. And then imagine those very funds vanishing, not into the hands of doctors, not into the budgets of hospitals, but into private accounts. Accounts allegedly tied to Meghan. That's the claim Harry has dropped, and if true, it is nothing short of catastrophic. It's the kind of betrayal that isn't just about money. It's about morality, integrity, and the very soul of the monarchy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But why now? Why, after years of fierce loyalty, is Harry turning his sword against Meghan? Is it guilt? Is it love twisted into something darker? Or is it the desperate move of a man who could no longer carry the burden of secrets? These questions are not only haunting Harry, they're haunting the world. And tonight, we're going to walk through the labyrinth of this story, one revelation at a time. Harry's silence for years was deafening. Through lawsuits, interviews, Netflix documentaries, and memoirs, he stood by Meghan's side, fiercely defending her. But silence can be dangerous. It festers. It rots. And now, it seems Harry has cracked. Did you ever wonder what happens when loyalty collides with truth? When love collides with law? That's what we're seeing unfold before our very eyes. The public has always questioned Meghan's motives, her ambition, her calculated rise into the royal spotlight. But never before has the accusation been this severe, this personal. Funds meant for sick children. That cuts differently, doesn't it? It's not about celebrity feuds or palace gossip. This is life and death. And Harry's claim has transformed the narrative from drama to potential crime. Think of the irony. Meghan and Harry branded themselves as champions of compassion, of kindness, of healing the world. They built foundations, appeared at charity galas, stood at podiums pledging support for the voiceless. They asked for donations, for belief, for trust. But according to Harry, behind the glossy speeches and carefully staged photo ops, there was something far more sinister at play. Do you feel that contradiction gnawing at you? How can two faces exist in one marriage, one person? How can love stories turn into exposés of betrayal? And this isn't just a headline. This is an unfolding saga where every detail matters. We're talking about coded emails, questionable bank transfers, whispers of offshore accounts. Harry didn't just make vague accusations. He allegedly brought receipts, documents that suggest money trails weaving through places most ordinary people couldn't even pronounce. What makes a prince decide to expose such things? Is it conscience? Is it vengeance? Or could it be fear? Fear of being complicit? Fear of losing everything if the truth came out another way? Now here's the real twist. Meghan's arrest. Yes, the moment that stunned the world didn't happen overnight. Arrests don't come from rumors. They come from evidence, from investigations, from a trail so compelling that authorities couldn't look away. And Harry, whether intentionally or unintentionally, may have been the accelerant that brought the fire down on Meghan. Picture it. The woman once heralded as a modern-day Diana being escorted under suspicion of crimes tied to charity money. Could you ever have imagined such a scene? It feels like fiction, but it isn't. And let's not pretend this is just Meghan versus the law. This is a ripple effect reaching the monarchy, the donors, the charities, and most importantly, the children who never saw the funds that were promised. That's why this story isn't just about scandal. It's about justice. It's about trust. And it's about whether or not Harry's decision to speak was an act of betrayal or redemption. Ask yourself this. If you discovered the person you loved most had been siphoning money from charities meant for children, would you keep the secret? Would you protect them? Or would you do what Harry has allegedly done? Turn them in, expose them, and let the chips fall where they may? There's no easy answer, and that's why this story grips us. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable. But Harry didn't leak everything all at once. No, that would be too easy, too predictable. Instead, he let it drip, piece by piece, each leak more shocking than the last. It began with whispers of missing money, then escalated to the revelation of secret accounts. The pattern was undeniable, and once the authorities began following the trail, the walls started closing in on Meghan. And here's where the stakes soar. Because every leak, every revelation, doesn't just hurt Meghan. It hurts the monarchy. It damages the reputation of the royal family, the institution Meghan once married into and Harry was born into. Harry's revelations are a double-edged sword. They strike at Meghan, but they also cut into the legacy of the crown. Can you feel the weight of that contradiction? Harry isn't just burning his wife. He's burning the very system he once vowed to escape, but never truly could. What comes next in this story will test every ounce of our understanding of loyalty, justice, and love. And make no mistake, this is only the beginning. Because while Harry's first leaks may have centered on the money trail, the deeper truths, the names, the emails, the networks involved, would drag this scandal from being just a personal tragedy into a global earthquake. But before we get there, we need to step back. We need to look at the first leak, the crack in the dam that unleashed this flood. And that's where our story truly begins. Because the first time Harry spoke out wasn't in a courtroom. It wasn't in a press release. It was in a late-night call that set everything in motion. And what he said on that call would not only mark the end of his marriage as we knew it, but the beginning of a scandal that could destroy Meghan's future forever. And that, my friends, is where we turn next. Because Harry's silence shattered in the most unexpected way, and once it did, there was no turning back. Harry's silence had always been his greatest weapon. Through all the storms, the endless tabloid headlines, the accusations hurled at Meghan, the royal feuds whispered in drawing rooms, he had stood by her, refusing to utter a single word that could fuel her critics. But then came that night, a night unlike any other, when the dam inside him broke, and the words he had once sworn never to speak came pouring out. It began quietly. A late-night phone call to someone Harry trusted more than most. Not a royal aide, not a lawyer, but a journalist with a history of keeping confidences until the right moment. The world doesn't know this part yet, but it's where the avalanche started. On that call, Harry didn't sound like a prince. He didn't sound like a husband. He sounded like a man haunted by guilt. "Do you want to know the truth?" he asked, his voice heavy, as if each word weighed him down. The journalist hesitated. Was Harry drunk? Was he angry? But then came the line that froze him in place. "It's about the charities, the children's hospitals. The money isn't there." Can you imagine hearing that? The Duke of Sussex, a man who built his reputation on philanthropy, hinting that funds for sick children had been stolen? And not stolen by some faceless bureaucrat, but by the woman he had fought the world to protect. That was the first leak, a whisper in the dark, and like a match thrown into dry brush, it set off a firestorm that Harry himself couldn't control. But why? Why that night? Why that call? For months, Harry had been carrying the weight of damning knowledge. Meghan, he alleged, had shifted charity funds into private accounts he had discovered through documents accidentally forwarded to him. Imagine opening an email and realizing your spouse might not be the person you thought they were. What would you do? Would you delete it and pretend it never happened? Or would you stare at it, night after night, until it consumed you? Harry couldn't look away. He couldn't erase the spreadsheets, the transfers, the names on the accounts. At first, he tried to confront Meghan. She denied it, of course, brushed it off as misunderstandings, as mismanagement by staff. But denial has a way of unraveling when evidence piles up. And Harry, despite wanting to believe her, found himself staring at the undeniable. Do you feel the irony here? The man who once told Oprah that his wife saved him, that Meghan had given him purpose, was now the one saying she had betrayed the very ideals they stood for. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal of a global image they carefully built together. Harry's breaking point came during one of those glossy charity events. Cameras flashing, speeches about compassion flowing, donors clapping. Meghan, radiant as always, stood at the podium promising every penny would go to children fighting for their lives. Harry, sitting beside her, couldn't shake the knowledge that at least some of those pennies were vanishing elsewhere. That image of children in hospital beds versus wire transfers to private accounts burned into his mind. And so the late-night call happened. But let's pause here. Do you think Harry made that call because he wanted justice? Or was it a cry for help? Some say he wanted to save his soul before it was too late. Others believe he was planting the seeds of an escape plan, distancing himself from Meghan before the walls caved in. What do you believe? That first leak wasn't the full truth. Harry didn't dump all the details at once. He dropped just enough to make the journalist curious, to make the world start asking questions. That's a tactic, isn't it? A slow burn instead of an explosion. Because once people start digging, once curiosity is sparked, the truth tends to claw its way out on its own. But Harry couldn't stop there. The guilt gnawed at him. One leak became two. Two became three. Soon, he was feeding information not just to one source, but to multiple. Carefully chosen words, strategically timed drops. He was orchestrating something, a controlled demolition of Meghan's reputation. And yet, every word he spoke was also setting fire to his own world. Now picture Meghan in this scenario. Oblivious at first, still smiling in front of cameras, still playing the role of the world's Duchess of Compassion. Meanwhile, her husband was secretly undermining her, dismantling her empire piece by piece. What do you think goes through a woman's mind when she realizes her own husband is the one pulling the strings behind the scandal? Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from within. Harry's silence had been his protection, but now his voice was his weapon. And once he started speaking, he couldn't stop. Friends noticed. He was restless, distracted, sometimes snapping at the smallest things. Meghan noticed too. She asked what was wrong, but Harry dodged. How do you look into the eyes of someone you once adored and admit you might destroy them? The night of that phone call, Harry admitted something else. He told the journalist he feared becoming complicit, that if he stayed silent, he would be guilty too. That's the mark of a conscience tearing itself apart. The royal family had always thrived on silence. Never complain, never explain. But Harry's conscience was louder than the palace code. And then came the turning point. Harry revealed the first destination of the missing funds, a private account overseas. He didn't give the name yet, but he gave enough breadcrumbs. Enough to make sure investigators would eventually follow the trail. That was the beginning of Meghan's unraveling. But here's the twist. Harry never expected the fallout to come so quickly. Within weeks, whispers turned into headlines. Journalists began chasing the story, donors began asking questions, investigators started sniffing around. Meghan was blindsided. And Harry? He sat in silence, knowing full well who had opened Pandora's box. Still, he hadn't told everything. Not yet. He hadn't named names. He hadn't shared the emails. He hadn't revealed the offshore accounts. That would come later, and when it did, it would be devastating. But the first leak, the crack in the dam, was enough to start the flood. And as Harry hung up that late-night call, his hands trembling, he knew there was no going back. Meghan would eventually find out. The monarchy would eventually react. The world would never see them the same again. But for Harry, there was something else. Something darker gnawing at him. Because the trail of money didn't just point to Meghan. It pointed to someone else. Someone who should never have been involved. Someone whose name would turn this scandal from personal betrayal into global shock. And that's where the story takes its first deadly turn. Because once Harry spoke that name aloud, the scandal became unstoppable. The trail of money is never as clean as people think. It doesn't vanish into thin air. It leaves marks, breadcrumbs, whispers in the form of numbers and bank codes. And when Prince Harry allegedly first revealed that Meghan Markle had diverted funds from charities, investigators didn't just listen. They started tracing every last coin. What they found shocked even the most seasoned professionals. Let's begin with the charities at the heart of this scandal. Children's hospitals across the UK and abroad. These weren't faceless institutions. They were places filled with fragile lives. Infants hooked to machines, children battling cancers, parents clinging to hope that donations could give their loved ones another chance at life. For years, donors, both wealthy and ordinary, poured money into campaigns fronted by Meghan and Harry. The Sussex brand was powerful, a young, modern couple promising compassion and transparency. Who wouldn't give? And give they did. Millions were raised in the names of these causes. Gala dinners, online appeals, celebrity endorsements. Every event was polished, every word scripted to tug at the heartstrings. Meghan, dressed in her best, would take the stage and declare, "Every penny counts for these children." Audiences would erupt in applause, moved by the sincerity of her words. But Harry, sitting quietly, now claims he knew. At least some of those pennies weren't going where promised. The first anomaly was small. A payment, barely noticeable, routed from a fundraising account to a private consultancy firm. On paper, it looked legitimate, strategic support services. But when investigators dug deeper, they discovered the consultancy firm was a shell, registered in a jurisdiction notorious for secrecy. Within days of receiving funds, the shell company transferred them again. This time offshore, where transparency evaporates. Have you ever wondered how financial scandals always seem to follow the same pattern? It begins with something tiny. A sliver of money, tucked away, disguised by jargon. It's almost as if the perpetrators are testing the waters, seeing if anyone notices. And if nobody does, they escalate. That's what appears to have happened here. What began as a small diversion soon grew into a torrent. Harry claims he had seen the spreadsheets. Line after line. Money moving from accounts labeled pediatric care or hospital grants into private consultancies, trust funds, even luxury lifestyle companies. Imagine the rage boiling inside him. Imagine sitting through events where Meghan praised donors, while he knew those very funds might be vanishing elsewhere. It was a contradiction too sharp to ignore. Now let's talk about the figures. One children's cancer fund raised £5 million in under a year. According to records Harry allegedly leaked, only £3.2 million reached the hospitals. The rest? Gone into a vortex of transfers. Another campaign, focused on neonatal intensive care units, raised over £2 million. But nearly half, £900,000, was moved into accounts with vague labels like operations management or research partnerships. When investigators followed, those partnerships barely existed. In some cases, they were nothing more than mailboxes in Caribbean jurisdictions. Do you feel the weight of that? This wasn't just careless accounting. This looked deliberate, systematic. And what about the people who first noticed? Insiders say charity staff had raised red flags for months. One accountant reportedly resigned, unwilling to sign off on discrepancies she couldn't explain. Another whistleblower allegedly emailed higher-ups about suspicious patterns, only to be silenced. Can you picture that? Ordinary workers, desperate to protect the children they served, going up against the glossy machine of the Sussex brand and being ignored. Here's where the story twists. Meghan's defenders insist these diversions were not theft, but restructuring. They claim money was being invested in long-term strategies, not misappropriated. But if that were true, why the secrecy? Why the offshore accounts? Why the shell corporations in countries known for shielding financial crime? Transparency would have silenced critics instantly, yet the accounts stayed hidden. Harry's conscience couldn't take it. Every gala he attended, every speech Meghan delivered, became a knife in his side. The applause of the audience felt hollow. The smiling photographs felt staged. And when journalists began asking questions about why hospitals weren't receiving their promised grants on time, Harry saw the writing on the wall. The truth was inching closer, and if he didn't act, he would be complicit. And then came the receipts. Investigators leaked snippets of bank statements. Six-figure sums transferred just days after major fundraising events. One transfer, £250,000, went straight to a luxury lifestyle company that specialized in private jets and exclusive retreats. Days later, Meghan and Harry were photographed boarding a private flight to an undisclosed island. Coincidence? Or part of the trail? You decide. This is where we pause and ask, was Meghan orchestrating this alone? Or was she simply the face of a much larger operation? That's the haunting question Harry dangled. Because the money didn't stop with her. The transfers led to networks of associates, shadowy figures who had long hovered in her Hollywood and socialite circles. People who understood how to move funds quietly, how to make money disappear. But imagine the betrayal for donors. Grandmothers writing checks from their pensions. Parents holding bake sales to raise funds. Celebrities auctioning personal items, believing their efforts would heal children. All while their money may have been siphoned into a world of luxury and secrecy. How does a movement built on compassion turn into something so cold? One insider compared the operation to a magician's trick. You think you're watching the donation go to the hospitals, but really, the money's being slipped into another hand right in front of you. That's the cruelty of it, the illusion. And Harry, sitting in the center of this illusion, couldn't bear it anymore. His conscience clashed with his loyalty. His marriage clashed with his morality. And when he finally broke, the first thing he did was outline the trail of funds. He gave investigators a map, a damning one. But here's the cliffhanger. Because while the financial trail already looked damning, Harry revealed that the money didn't just stop at Meghan's private accounts. It didn't just stop at shell companies. No, it pointed to someone closer. Someone inside Meghan's inner circle. Someone whose involvement would drag the scandal from being a financial crime to a family betrayal. And when Harry spoke that name, the world of Meghan Markle began to collapse. Every scandal has an inner circle. The public always sees the faces on stage, the glamorous smiles, the rehearsed speeches. But behind the curtain, in the shadows, are the people who pull the strings. Meghan Markle was never just one woman navigating fame and royalty. She was the center of a carefully woven web. A network of friends, advisors, and financiers who helped her climb, protected her secrets, and, if Harry's leaks are to be believed, enabled the scandal that has now brought her crashing down. Harry's most shocking revelation after exposing the money trail wasn't just that charity funds were disappearing. It was that Meghan wasn't alone. She had help. Trusted people she once leaned on weren't simply bystanders. They were allegedly accomplices. Think about that for a moment. The betrayal stings deeper when it comes not only from your spouse, but from people who eat at your table, toast at your wedding, and share in your victories. Who were they? How did they operate? And why did Harry finally decide to blow the whistle? Let's start with the first name Harry allegedly dropped, a longtime Hollywood publicist who had known Meghan since her Suits days. This figure, according to leaked documents, wasn't just helping Meghan craft her image. They were allegedly the middleman for money transfers, ensuring funds disappeared through marketing contracts and promotional campaigns that never existed. Imagine the audacity, using Hollywood gloss to hide financial grime. Harry reportedly told investigators, it wasn't just her. She had people who knew exactly what they were doing. Those words shifted the narrative. Meghan wasn't just accused of misusing money. She was accused of leading a team, a syndicate, if you will, that cloaked itself in the image of compassion while quietly exploiting it. And then came the second figure, a financier based in Los Angeles, someone Meghan allegedly met through her Hollywood network. On paper, this person ran a boutique investment firm. Behind the scenes, according to Harry, they specialized in creating shell corporations and offshore accounts. The perfect partner for anyone looking to divert large sums unnoticed. What's more chilling? This financier had previously been investigated in minor tax cases, but walked away untouched. A seasoned ghost in the financial system, now allegedly tied to Meghan's empire. Can you see how deep this runs? Meghan's circle wasn't just made of friends. It was made of operatives. People who understood optics, people who understood money, people who knew how to turn applause into bank codes. But Harry's revelations didn't stop there. He spoke of private dinners, hushed conversations in Montecito, where plans were allegedly drawn up. Plans not just to fundraise, but to reroute. The language was coded, almost innocent on the surface. Partnership opportunities, restructuring funds, expanding outreach. Words that sound harmless, but when attached to bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, they take on a different weight. And here's where things get personal. Harry alleged that one of Meghan's closest friends, someone the media had long fawned over as her ride or die, was in on it too. This wasn't just a business associate. It was a friend who held her secrets, someone Meghan had leaned on during her battles with the press, someone who had been painted as loyal to the core. To discover that same person's name attached to suspicious financial trails must have felt like a dagger. Ask yourself this: what would hurt more? Discovering your spouse had betrayed their public image, or discovering that the people you welcomed into your home, the ones you trusted with your private fears, were part of the machine? That's the horror Harry claims he lived with. And yet, Meghan played her part flawlessly. Publicly, she presented herself as the Duchess of Compassion, championing mental health, women's rights, racial equality. But behind closed doors, according to Harry, she was hosting meetings that looked more like boardroom sessions than charity discussions. Everything was about strategy, about control, about keeping the image alive while the money flowed elsewhere. It's almost cinematic, isn't it? The dual life. One face for the cameras, another in the shadows. But the irony is cruel. The very network Meghan built to protect her brand may be the same one that destroyed it. Because once Harry began talking, those names weren't just whispers. They became targets for investigators. One insider described Meghan's network as a fortress built on quicksand, strong on the surface, fragile underneath. When Harry cracked the first wall by leaking financial records, the fortress began to sink. Suddenly, people in Meghan's circle started distancing themselves. The publicist denied involvement. The financier claimed ignorance. Friends stopped answering calls. Loyalty evaporated. The network Meghan thought unbreakable began crumbling before her eyes. But here's the twist that makes this chapter so haunting. Harry claimed Meghan wasn't just surrounded by willing accomplices. She was surrounded by people who were afraid. Afraid of her influence, afraid of her ambition, afraid of what would happen if they crossed her. Meghan, in Harry's words, ruled her inner circle like a queen off the throne, commanding, strategic, and ruthless when necessary. Could that fear have kept people silent, even as they watched the trail of money vanish into darkness? And yet, fear doesn't last forever. When investigators began circling, some of Meghan's so-called loyalists flipped. One friend allegedly turned over private emails. Another confessed details of offshore accounts. Betrayal breeds betrayal. The very network Meghan relied upon began to unravel itself from within. Now pause and think. If Meghan's closest allies turned against her, what chance did she have to defend herself? It wasn't just Harry's leaks anymore. It was her own circle feeding the fire. Imagine the devastation of realizing that the walls of your fortress weren't protecting you. They were collapsing on top of you. But here's where the cliffhanger sharpens. Because Harry's leaks about Meghan's network weren't just about shady friends and financial ghosts. He alleged that one of those names, buried deep in the web, connected to someone inside the royal family itself. Not directly, perhaps, but close enough to send shockwaves through the monarchy. And that single connection would transform the scandal from Meghan's downfall into a royal earthquake. Money has a strange way of telling its own story. You can erase emails. You can destroy letters. You can silence witnesses. But the flow of money always leaves a ghost behind. That ghost whispered through the offshore accounts Meghan Markle allegedly built, accounts Prince Harry revealed, in what has now become one of the most explosive betrayals of modern royal history. Let's start with the geography of scandal. Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Belize, even a discreet private bank in Luxembourg. These are not random places. They are the world's vaults for secrets, havens where the ultra-rich hide assets behind codes and shell companies. When investigators followed the trails Harry leaked, they didn't just find questionable consultancy fees or partnerships. They found routes into these offshore labyrinths, places no children's charity should ever lead. Picture the journey. Money raised at a gala in London for sick children. Donors moved to tears, pledging tens of thousands. Within weeks, instead of appearing in hospital budgets, the funds were routed to a consultancy firm in Los Angeles. From there, within 48 hours, they traveled again. Split into smaller transfers, sent to banks in Switzerland under the name of a trust no one had ever heard of. And just like that, the money was invisible. But Harry's revelations didn't stop at the destinations. He claimed Meghan was directly tied to at least two of these accounts. One was linked to a shell company registered in Belize, supposedly a wellness brand. On paper, it looked like the kind of venture Meghan could plausibly endorse: organic products, mental health advocacy, lifestyle campaigns. In reality, it was little more than a name, an empty office, and a banking number. Funds labeled children's oncology grants ended up there. Can you imagine the emotional whiplash of that discovery? Donors thinking their money was funding chemotherapy for children, only to discover it had been rerouted into a paper company in Central America. The second account was even more shocking. Harry alleged that Meghan herself was listed as a silent beneficiary. A private account in Switzerland, protected by layers of trustees. It wasn't in her name directly, but through a complex web of nominees. Harry admitted it took him months to piece it together, but once he did, the reality crushed him. His wife, the woman he defended against the entire world, was allegedly siphoning money into her own secret vault. Do you feel the sting of betrayal here? Imagine looking across the dinner table at someone who swears they're fighting for compassion, while you hold proof they're hoarding funds meant for dying children. It's more than scandal. It's Shakespearean tragedy. Now let's talk about the numbers. According to leaks, one Swiss account swelled by over £1.8 million in less than a year. Funds traced back to campaigns Meghan and Harry personally fronted. Another Belize account saw a sudden surge of $750,000 after a high-profile charity event in New York. And the Cayman Islands? That's where the largest single transfer went, nearly £2. $3 million in just 3 installments. How do you explain that? Mismanagement? Innocent restructuring? Meghan's defenders scrambled for answers, but the numbers spoke louder than words. And Harry, once silent, became the amplifier of those numbers. But here's where the contradictions sharpen. Meghan wasn't living like a recluse. She was flaunting luxury. Private jets, exclusive retreats, designer wardrobes expanding by the season. The irony was cruel. While charities sent desperate letters begging for their pledged grants, Meghan was photographed in outfits costing more than a nurse's annual salary. The public saw glamour. Harry saw guilt. This is where Harry's story takes a darker turn. Because according to him, these offshore accounts weren't just about greed. They were about power. Meghan, he claimed, wanted independence from the monarchy, from Britain, even from him. She didn't trust the system around her. She wanted her own empire, her own fortress of wealth, untouchable by royal control or legal oversight. The offshore vaults were her insurance policy, her escape route. But escape routes can become traps. Once investigators mapped the offshore trail, those accounts became evidence. And Harry, whether by guilt or vengeance, had handed them the keys. Now ask yourself this. Why would Meghan risk everything for offshore secrecy when she already lived a life of wealth and privilege? Was it simple greed? Was it paranoia? Or was it ambition? The kind of ambition that builds secret war chests for futures the world doesn't yet know about? Harry allegedly told investigators that Meghan spoke often of being her own woman, of never depending on anyone. Was this her way of ensuring that independence? By hoarding millions behind closed doors, even if it meant robbing children of their futures? And yet, here's the most chilling part. Offshore accounts aren't invisible forever. They leak. They get exposed in papers like the Panama or Paradise Papers. And when they do, names tied to them rarely recover. Meghan's name, now allegedly attached, became a liability not just for herself, but for the monarchy. That's the irony. Harry's leaks didn't just implicate Meghan. They implicated the crown. Because how could a duchess divert funds into offshore accounts without the institution noticing? Either the palace was blind, or worse, complicit. And that's where the scandal shifts gears. What started as a money trail now hinted at something deeper, something institutional. Meghan may have built her offshore empire with her circle, but the cracks Harry revealed pointed toward negligence. Maybe even cover-ups, higher up. But before that revelation shook the monarchy, something else happened. Investigators uncovered a set of emails tied to the offshore accounts. Emails written not just by Meghan, but by someone else, a name no one expected to see. A name that connected the scandal to a level of betrayal no one saw coming. And when those emails came to light, Meghan's fortress of offshore secrecy collapsed into flames. What brings down empires isn't always armies or revolutions. Sometimes it's words. A careless phrase, a hidden message, an email never meant to see daylight. For Meghan Markle, the emails Prince Harry allegedly leaked weren't just damaging, they were devastating. Because emails don't lie. They capture intent. They preserve tone. They show coordination. And the batch Harry exposed painted a picture so damning that even Meghan's most loyal defenders struggled to explain it away. It started with a simple subject line, allocation update. At first glance, it looked harmless, the kind of routine message you'd expect from a charity treasurer or a financial advisor. But the contents told a different story. The email, addressed directly to Meghan, outlined transfers of funds from a children's hospital fundraising campaign into accounts described as special projects. One of those projects was later revealed to be the Belize shell company already tied to Meghan. Now pause for a moment. Imagine the shock of reading that. Donors thought their money was buying life-saving machines for premature babies. Instead, in black and white, the email showed it was being rerouted elsewhere. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't gossip. It was evidence. Harry claimed that this was the first email that broke him. He had stumbled across it accidentally, forwarded to his inbox by mistake. He read it once, then again, then a third time, hoping he had misunderstood. But the wording was clear, clinical, and chilling. And that was only the beginning. The next email was more brazen. Subject line: priorities going forward. Meghan was allegedly copied in, along with 2 of her close associates. The message discussed strategies for diverting funds into long-term growth avenues, code words, investigators say, for private accounts. One line in particular stood out: visibility is key. Public optics must remain centered on compassion campaigns. Reallocation must be invisible. Do you feel the sting of that contradiction? Public optics of compassion. Private diversions of funds. A double life, written out like corporate strategy. Harry, according to insiders, was crushed. He told investigators, it wasn't just money. It was deception. Planned deception. But the third email was the one that burned bridges beyond repair. Its subject line: royal liaison. And within it, a shocking name appeared. Someone inside the royal machinery. A figure allegedly advising Meghan on how to navigate scrutiny while keeping the accounts untouchable. Their advice? Ensure minimal paper trails. Personal communication only. Use third-party vehicles to maintain distance. This wasn't just Meghan's circle anymore. This was a royal-adjacent contact giving her cover. That single detail turned the scandal from personal betrayal into a potential palace conspiracy. Did the royal family know? Were they helping her? Or was this rogue advice from someone trying to protect themselves? Harry didn't say, but by leaking the email, he ensured the question would haunt the monarchy. And then came Meghan's own words. In one reply, she allegedly wrote, "Keep transfers staggered. Optics matter. As long as donations keep coming, we can manage the rest." Cold. Calculated. Not the language of a duchess championing compassion, but of someone running an operation. This was the point of no return. Emails can be denied. They can be dismissed as fabrications. But when multiple sources confirm their existence, when they align with bank transfers, when timestamps match fundraising events, the story becomes impossible to kill. Now ask yourself, how would you feel if you read those words from someone you loved? Harry had sworn to protect Meghan from every critic, every smear. But now, he wasn't protecting her. He was exposing her. Not because he wanted to, but because, as he told one confidant, if I stay silent, I'm guilty too. The emotional weight of those emails crushed not only Meghan's public image, but Harry's heart. He was betraying the woman he once called his soulmate. Yet in his mind, she had already betrayed him and the world. This is where the contradictions get cruel. Meghan continued to smile in public, delivering speeches about mental health and children's welfare. But behind the scenes, her words and emails suggested an obsession with optics over substance. The very compassion she preached was allegedly being weaponized as a mask for financial gains. And Harry? He couldn't sleep. He began sharing the emails, slowly at first, then more freely. Each one leaked was like a dagger. Not only at Meghan, but at himself. Because every revelation reminded him that he had once defended her, vouched for her, sold her image to the world. The guilt was unbearable. But what makes these emails so destructive isn't just their content. It's their reach. Once investigators had them, they began cross-referencing with donors, events, transfers. Patterns emerged. Timelines matched. One email spoke of a reallocation in March. That same month, a hospital reported delays in receiving pledged funds. Another email mentioned luxury retreat disbursement. Days later, Meghan and Harry were spotted at an exclusive Caribbean resort. Coincidence? Or a smoking gun? The final email Harry leaked before Meghan's arrest carried a line that still haunts those who've read it. Meghan allegedly wrote, "As long as Harry stays loyal, nothing can touch us." Do you feel the bitter irony of that line now? The very man she counted on to shield her became the man who shattered her shield. And once those words reached the public, once the world saw not just speculation, but Meghan's own alleged replies, the tide turned. Donors demanded answers. Hospitals threatened lawsuits. Authorities moved in. The walls Meghan had built with charm and compassion collapsed into rubble. But here's where the cliffhanger sharpens. Because while these emails destroyed Meghan's reputation, they also implicated someone else. Someone Meghan trusted more than anyone besides Harry. Someone whose name, buried in those exchanges, would explode into the headlines and widen the scandal beyond Meghan's reach. And when that name was revealed, it wasn't just Meghan's downfall anymore. It was the beginning of a royal implosion. The monarchy has always thrived on one unshakable rule: silence. Never complain, never explain. It's the golden shield that has protected the crown for centuries. When scandals erupt, when rumors swirl, the royal family retreats into an impenetrable quiet, allowing the storm to pass. But this time was different. This time, the storm was coming from within their own walls. And the leaks from Prince Harry didn't just target Meghan Markle. They hinted at something far more dangerous: the possibility that senior royals, directly or indirectly, knew what was happening. This is where the scandal stopped being about Meghan alone and began to corrode the monarchy itself. Because in those emails Harry leaked, one name appeared that no one expected: a royal liaison. An insider, someone tied to the palace machinery, giving Meghan advice on how to cover her tracks. Let's pause here. Do you understand the gravity of that? It wasn't just a duchess allegedly siphoning money. It was the monarchy's shadow touching the scandal. The institution built on centuries of honor suddenly tainted by whispers of complicity. Harry didn't reveal the identity outright, but he described the role. The liaison allegedly warned Meghan about overexposure, advised her to stagger transfers, and urged her to keep paper trails to a minimum. It sounded less like concern for children's hospitals and more like crisis management for someone with something to hide. Now ask yourself this: if Meghan had palace guidance, how deep did this run? Was it one rogue advisor? Or was the family itself turning a blind eye, willing to protect Meghan for the sake of avoiding another royal humiliation? Harry's decision to leak this detail wasn't just personal vengeance. It was a nuclear strike on the monarchy's reputation. For years, he had accused the institution of failing to protect Meghan, of leaving her exposed to the press. But now, he claimed the palace may have been protecting her in ways no one expected, shielding her from scrutiny, even as children's hospitals were left underfunded. Imagine the shockwaves in Buckingham Palace when that detail surfaced. Behind closed doors, courtiers scrambled. Phones rang nonstop. Strategies were drawn in panic. The royals had faced scandals before: divorces, affairs, even abdications. But financial scandal tied to sick children? That was a new and poisonous territory. One insider described the atmosphere as controlled terror. Staff whispered about what Harry would leak next. Senior royals debated responses. But in public, silence reigned. The palace released no statement, no denial, no defense. And that silence became damning in itself. Because in a world that demands transparency, silence often reads as guilt. But let's consider the personal side of this. For Harry, exposing the liaison was like ripping open his last tether to the crown. He wasn't just condemning Meghan. He was condemning his family, the very people who raised him, the very system he once vowed to serve. That's why his leaks cut so deep. They weren't just about money. They were about loyalty. And once you betray both your wife and your family, what's left? And what of Meghan? Imagine her fury discovering that Harry hadn't just leaked her secrets, but had dragged the monarchy into it. The palace, the crown, the institution she had fought so hard against, now entangled in her alleged downfall. Did she feel betrayed? Or did she feel abandoned by the very royals who once promised her protection? Either way, her isolation grew. But here's the cruel irony. The monarchy, by staying silent, may have dug its own grave. Because Harry's leaks painted a picture of shadows and cover-ups. And every unanswered question fueled the fire. Was the liaison acting alone? Did higher powers know? Was this a case of negligence, or was it deliberate? The world wanted answers, and the silence screamed louder than any denial could. Let's not forget the public. The British people, already skeptical after decades of royal dramas, were outraged. Donations had been made in good faith. Hospitals were left waiting. And now, Instead of clear answers, they were given whispers of royal involvement. The monarchy's image as a beacon of duty and service cracked under the weight of suspicion. But Harry wasn't finished. He told investigators that the palace's silence wasn't a surprise. "They've covered before," he said. Those words sent shivers through royal watchers. What else had been covered? What other scandals were waiting, hidden in the vaults of royal secrecy? This is where the scandal stopped being about one woman and became a question about an entire institution. If Meghan's alleged crimes were enabled, even indirectly, by palace silence, then the monarchy itself was guilty by association. And that association threatened to unravel centuries of carefully maintained trust. But here's where the cliffhanger sharpens. Because Harry didn't just stop at the liaison. He hinted that Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, wasn't entirely innocent either. According to Harry, Doria's name appeared in conversations tied to financial movements. And if true, that dragged the scandal beyond Meghan, beyond the monarchy, into her very family. Which raises the ultimate question, was Meghan the mastermind, or was she part of something even bigger, a web of family and royal shadows working together? And once Doria's name surfaced, the scandal turned from financial crime to generational betrayal. Every story of scandal eventually pulls in family. And in Meghan Markle's case, no family member has been more enigmatic, more carefully shielded, than her mother, Doria Ragland. From the very beginning, Doria was presented as the picture of dignity, quiet, composed, supportive. She was the lone figure at Meghan's royal wedding, sitting with poise as the world watched. Unlike Meghan's estranged father and half-siblings, Doria was supposed to be untouchable, the one person who had never embarrassed Meghan in public. But according to Harry's leaks, even that image may not have been the full truth. Because hidden in the financial trails, investigators allegedly found traces of Doria's name. Not as a mastermind, not as a puppet master, but as someone tied to accounts, trusts, and consultancy roles that raised more questions than answers. And when Harry revealed this, it shifted the scandal from being Meghan's personal downfall to something much more devastating, a family affair. Let's rewind. Doria has always been portrayed as the grounding influence in Meghan's life. While Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, became tabloid fodder, Doria was seen as Meghan's rock. Harry himself once described her as incredibly supportive, even calling her a second mother to him. But behind the serene yoga instructor image, Doria had connections. Quiet connections. She worked in mental health. She had ties to nonprofits. She understood the world of fundraising, at least on the periphery. And according to Harry, those ties weren't always as clean as they appeared. One of the first revelations was an email chain where Doria's name appeared as a consultant on a project funded by one of Meghan and Harry's charity initiatives. On the surface, it looked like Meghan was bringing her mother into her philanthropic empire, a sweet gesture, a way to involve family. But investigators noticed something odd. Doria received a consultancy payment of nearly £120,000. The problem? There was no evidence of any consultancy work ever done. No reports, no minutes, no deliverables. Just a payment, and then silence. Now ask yourself this. Why would a duchess, already accused of moving funds around, route money to her mother? Was it family favoritism? Or was it something darker, a way to disguise the diversion of funds by pushing them through trusted hands? Harry's leaks went further. He told investigators that Meghan often justified certain transfers by saying, "It's for Mom. She's helping." Helping with what, though? That was the unanswered question. Doria was never a public strategist, never a financial wizard. Yet her name appeared in paperwork tied to offshore trusts in California and Belize. How does a retired social worker end up linked to accounts worth hundreds of thousands of pounds? The emotional weight of this revelation crushed Harry. For years, he had admired Doria, even defended her against critics. Unlike Meghan's father, who often lashed out in the press, Doria had remained silent, dignified. Harry believed she was the one stable figure Meghan had. But now, the documents suggested she was at least peripherally involved in Meghan's alleged schemes. Was she complicit? Or was she being used by her daughter as a front, a shield? Consider the irony. Meghan had distanced herself from her father, branding him as untrustworthy. Yet the mother she exalted, the one person she trusted above all, was the one whose name now appeared in suspicious money trails. The contrast is haunting, but here's where the story deepens. One investigator described the financial patterns as layered. Money would leave a fundraising account, pass through a consultancy tied to Meghan's circle, and then land briefly in an account connected to Doria. Within days, it would move again, offshore, hidden in complex webs of shell companies. Doria's account was like a middle station. Not the origin, not the final destination, but a stop along the way. Harry, in private, allegedly said, "She wasn't the brains. But she knew." That's the line that stings. If true, it suggests Doria wasn't masterminding, but she wasn't ignorant either. She may have understood that money meant for hospitals was passing through her name, and she allowed it. And think of the emotional fallout. Meghan always painted herself as fiercely protective of her mother. Doria was the only relative she paraded proudly in public. She lived in Montecito with Harry and Meghan at times, helping raise Archie and Lilibet. She was part of their daily lives. To drag her into a financial scandal isn't just legal disaster, it's personal devastation. For Harry, this was the cruelest twist yet. The woman he once saw as an ally, as the safe parent in Meghan's chaotic family, was now tainted. And by exposing her, Harry didn't just destroy Meghan's reputation. He destroyed the one bond Meghan seemed to value most. Now let's step into Meghan's shoes for a moment. Imagine the rage of seeing your mother's name plastered in headlines, dragged through accusations, all because your husband leaked documents. Meghan's fury wasn't just about self-preservation anymore. It was about family. Harry hadn't just betrayed her. He had betrayed her mother. That fracture was deeper than any marital spat. It was war. And yet, there's a lingering question. Was Doria truly complicit, or was she a pawn? Some insiders whisper that Meghan often used her mother's name to soften scrutiny, to make questionable transfers look more legitimate. Who would question a payment labeled Doria's consultancy? It seemed harmless. It seemed maternal. Perhaps Doria herself didn't fully understand the scale of what she was part of. But ignorance is rarely a defense. Once her name was tied to those accounts, investigators widened the net. Doria went from silent supporter to potential witness, maybe even suspect. And that shift turned Meghan's scandal into something generational. Now pause here. What does it do to a daughter to see her mother pulled into handcuffs of suspicion? What does it do to a husband to know he's the reason it happened? This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a family implosion. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the investigation unearthed another layer. Meghan's ties to her Hollywood past. Because while her mother's name dragged the scandal into the personal, her Hollywood connections would drag it into the global spotlight. The people who once helped Meghan climb the ladder of fame were suddenly implicated in helping her build financial shadows. And that, more than anything, would turn Meghan's downfall into a spectacle the world couldn't turn away from. Hollywood has always been Meghan Markle's first stage. Before the royal titles, before the castles and tiaras, there were red carpets, casting calls, and a carefully cultivated network of agents, producers, and social climbers. Meghan wasn't just an actress on Suits. She was someone who understood that Hollywood isn't about talent alone. It's about connections, optics, alliances. And according to Harry's leaks, that same Hollywood network didn't disappear when she became the Duchess of Sussex. It followed her, quietly, into her royal life, and eventually into the scandal that would consume her. Harry's revelations about offshore accounts and diverted funds led investigators into places they never expected, back into the heart of Hollywood. The very world Meghan had once escaped to marry a prince may have been the world she relied upon to build her alleged financial web. Think about this. When Meghan married Harry, she claimed she was giving up Hollywood for duty and love. But in reality, she never severed those ties. She brought them with her, in the form of old managers, publicists, and business consultants. And when Harry allegedly leaked her financial secrets, names from her past began surfacing in the documents. The first shock was a producer Meghan had worked with years before Suits. His name appeared on consultancy invoices tied to Meghan and Harry's charitable foundation. On the surface, it looked legitimate, payments for media support and brand outreach. But investigators discovered the company he represented didn't actually produce anything in years. It was a shell, a Hollywood front, funneling funds from charity events into accounts that later connected to Meghan's private empire. How's that for irony? The glitzy world of Hollywood, with its endless illusion, being used to cover financial sleight of hand. The second figure was even more notorious, a Beverly Hills fixer, known for arranging discreet deals for celebrities. This individual allegedly specialized in crisis management, smoothing over scandals, and rerouting money through image campaigns. According to leaked emails, Meghan's team consulted him during periods of heightened media scrutiny. His advice? Keep the compassion optics strong. Push lifestyle narratives. Move funds quietly through media partnerships. It sounds almost cinematic, doesn't it? The Duchess of Compassion taking advice from a Hollywood fixer whose job was to hide messy truths behind glossy stories. And yet, Harry's leaks suggested that this wasn't a one-time thing. Meghan's Hollywood ties weren't incidental. They were integral. They provided the infrastructure, the smoke and mirrors, the shell companies disguised as production houses or PR firms. To the outside world, it looked like Meghan was leveraging her Hollywood past for good, raising funds, producing inspiring campaigns, securing donations. But behind the curtain, investigators traced those donations being siphoned off through entities tied to her Hollywood network. Now let's add another layer. Meghan's relationship with certain celebrities, friendships carefully flaunted in the media, took on a new light. Remember the star-studded baby shower in New York? The A-list dinners? The Netflix and Spotify deals? According to Harry's leaks, some of these ventures weren't just about brand building. They were about money management. Payments were bundled into media contracts, but portions of them quietly rerouted to the same offshore accounts already tied to Meghan. Do you feel the contradiction? The same world that elevated Meghan into global superstardom may also have provided the scaffolding for her alleged downfall. The illusion of Hollywood glamour masking the gritty machinery of financial diversion. And here's where it gets darker. Harry alleged that one particular Hollywood associate, a woman Meghan once called her mentor, had acted as a bridge between Meghan's charities and the shadow financiers in Los Angeles. This mentor, a figure known for her work in philanthropy, allegedly advised Meghan to maximize revenue streams by blending charitable donations with private investments. The language was clever, professional, even inspiring on the surface. But investigators argue it was code for disguising diversions. Ask yourself, what's worse? That Meghan may have orchestrated diversions for personal gain? Or that she cloaked them in the language of charity, using Hollywood branding to make it all look noble? The emotional impact of these revelations was brutal. Donors who gave because of Meghan's celebrity sparkle now realized that very sparkle may have been part of the scam. Hospitals that trusted her star power felt betrayed. Even celebrities who had stood by her began distancing themselves. Who wants to be linked to a duchess accused of exploiting Hollywood glitz to steal from children's hospitals? And Harry? His guilt deepened. Hollywood had been Meghan's world, not his. He had once admired how she moved through it with grace, how she turned connections into opportunities. But now he saw it differently. He saw a network of opportunists, enablers, and ghosts from her past who weren't lifting her up. They were helping her hollow out her image from within. Insiders say Harry's leaks about Hollywood ties were deliberate. By dragging those names into the scandal, he ensured the story couldn't be dismissed as a royal feud. Hollywood is global. It's glamorous. And when names from that world surfaced, the media frenzy tripled. Harry knew that once Hollywood was implicated, the scandal would transcend Britain, becoming a worldwide spectacle. But Meghan's fury, when she discovered this, was volcanic. Hollywood wasn't just her past, it was her insurance policy, her bridge to power outside the monarchy. By exposing those ties, Harry wasn't just attacking her. He was cutting off her escape route. And Meghan, who prided herself on always having options, suddenly found herself cornered. And yet, as damaging as these Hollywood revelations were, they weren't the final betrayal. Because as investigators followed the trail deeper, one Hollywood figure turned. Someone once close to Meghan, someone who had benefited from her rise, suddenly flipped and sided with Harry. That betrayal would pierce Meghan more deeply than any royal feud ever could. And it was this former ally's testimony that escalated the scandal from suspicion to undeniable proof. Friendship is supposed to be sacred. It's the bond that survives scandals, the loyalty that endures when everything else falls apart. Meghan Markle built her public image on the idea of tight-knit friendships, the kind that would never waver. From her carefully curated inner circle at her wedding to the glossy magazine spreads highlighting her ride-or-die companions, Meghan seemed to project the aura of someone loved fiercely by those around her. But what happens when one of those friends decides to turn? When loyalty cracks under pressure? Prince Harry's leaks revealed money trails, emails, and offshore accounts. But what truly sealed Meghan's fate wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was betrayal. A friend's betrayal. Someone close enough to know her secrets. Someone who had once stood proudly by her side now stood against her, delivering testimony so damning that it shattered what little defense Meghan had left. The friend in question was not a casual acquaintance. This wasn't a distant Hollywood contact or a business associate hiding behind titles. This was someone Meghan had trusted deeply, someone she had shared dinners with, someone who had been photographed.